It's quite clear today was Rishi Sunak eventually revealing what we all knew, that he isn't really a proper Brexiteer. To bring back David Cameron, apart from all the democratic issues and implications of it, apart from the obvious vote of no confidence in his own Conservative Party MPs from whom he couldn't find a Foreign Secretary, apart from that, this is a man who voted Remain, campaigned for Remain, had to resign because of his position on Remain, poisoned the well, arguably, for the deal that we eventually got with the EU because the way he went about his business. And he's back in one of the most senior offices in Cabinet. And, you know, you can say it requires special skills. Of course it does. But on that basis, you might as well appoint a bureaucratic government without any democratic say whatsoever.
You have got a PM who was appointed leader.
He's
appointed leader
absolutely.
by MPs, who has himself appointed David Cameron. So, in a sense, they're moving further and further away from the elected mandate they got in 2019, and that's what I'd worry about with the Tory party.
Let me ask you about this, because Leader of the Commons, he's basically been critical today, saying this is not very democratic,
yes,
this Cameron thing, in terms of accountability. He's
right. You see, so that's Lindsay Hoyle that gave a statement out in the House of Commons, and he made very clear that when things are happening, and goodness me, a lot's happening right now in the world, so there's a crisis in Gaza, who then fronts up the questions from the elected representatives of the British people? Well, it's going to be Andrew Mitchell, who's a former International Development Secretary, who's number 2 to David Cameron. But the boss, David Cameron, the one who knows what's going on, isn't in the House of Commons now. He's in the House of Lords, where the questioning is arguably more gentle and there's much more of a cohesive feel.
And how common is that, just to help bring people up to speed? A setup like that, is that the norm?
I remember, you probably won't remember.
I'm only 21,
You're
Chris.
too young, Miss Child, but Lord Carrington was the last Foreign Secretary who was also in the House of Lords. Before that, Lord Salisbury is the last former leader of Prime Minister who became back. I actually, bizarrely, heard this rumour back in 2018 over lunch with someone. I didn't quite believe it, but I offered it up to the newspaper where I worked for at the time, that his way back in was as a peer, as Foreign Secretary, and lo, it's come to pass. A stop clock is never wrong more than once.
And when you say Andrew Mitchell, my brain is thinking Plebgate. Is that the right? Is that the same guy?
That's the same person.
See, this is what I think is quite a shame in politics today. I now recognise people based on the scandal that they've been involved in.
And what about Greensill? What about Greensill with David Cameron?
Come on,
of course,
to
he was cleared over all that.
But maybe cleared, but he was the Prime Minister who said he found it abhorrent when ministers left office and then lobbied the government. And there he was lobbying the government.
Well, with WhatsApps injudiciously sent to staff there. I mean, Ben, yes, you're right, but what has happened in short order, without us knowing, was a thing called the HOLAC. The House of Lords Appointments Commission did consider his peerage against the standards you're talking about and cleared him.
Let me ask you this as well. One of the things that I find quite staggering, and maybe I'm just not connected in the right WhatsApp groups, normally nothing goes on in politics, so it seems, without it leaking. In advance. And it annoys me, because I just think, just have a little bit of decorum, keep some stuff in and then deal with it properly. Am I right in thinking that no one really saw this Cameron thing coming?
Apart from me 6 years ago, but no one believed me then. I'm like some John the Baptist in the wilderness.
Are you now? But seriously though, this time around...
Yes, you're right. You are yes, you are totally right. And this idea came from Rishi Sunak, who approached David Cameron. It just showed that the tightness of people around Sunak is a strength and a weakness. The strength is nothing leaks. The weakness is, I think, is they are reluctant to accept alternative views, and they create a feeling of a clique around him, which is really annoying people. I go back to this letter tonight from Andrea Jenkin MP. It just is interesting to go public with a letter at 6 p.m. on the day of such a big day in politics.
Christopher, I mean, don't you think that, in a way, the Cameron thing, if it was going to be positive, was only a Westminster bubble story? I mean, that journalists are fascinated by it, blah, blah. But actually, out there, you know, you're not going to get one extra vote on foreign policy. That's what it is. So, and then it absolutely annoys first of all, most of the MPs who've been overlooked, but also, I mean, as Michelle and Ben are saying, it absolutely annoys the right wing of the Tory party. I mean, it just
Scott, you're so right. You've nailed it there. With it's almost a perfect Venn diagram of anger. But what will Keir Starmer say in Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday? He will say, Mr Sunak, the Prime Minister, look around you. Who in here, why can't no one here be your Foreign Secretary? No. Why is the only person who can be Foreign Secretary not even in the building in the Palace of Westminster? The only person who can do this job is someone living with his trotters up in a shepherd's hut in Oxfordshire.
And that's what people have said, that it is essentially a vote of no confidence.
In MPs?
In his MPs, and that's what I've heard a lot today. If he doesn't have the confidence in his MPs, how on earth do you expect anyone and everyone at home? Let me ask you,
He brings authority, though, to be fair to him. He brings authority... Statesmanship. And I did look at photographs of the team around Rishi Sunak. He's 42 years old. He's quite young. Cameron's nearly 60, half a generation older than him. You look at him and think, where is the grey heads around him, like me and Ben are grey? Where's the people with experience who can say, well, we did it this way? And I think he does give that authority and experience, but arguably, should he get that role in a role which should be filled by an elected person? Well,
I'm going to ask you lot that at home, but before you go, very briefly, what next? Are we expecting any other twists and turns tonight?
Not tonight. There are some angry people who have been fired tonight. We'll wait and see what happens from them. And indeed, sorry, forgive me, it's a Suella Braverman Day, don't forget, but that happened nearly 10 hours ago when she was fired on the phone this morning, a phone call, that's it, no exchange of letters. We're waiting to see what she does next.
But again, how typical is that?
It's atypical not to do a very kind of, exchange of letters between the Prime Minister and the person leaving, normally.
And she's not said much other than she has more to say.
Hopefully,
many of us are
to you,
looking forward. Yeah, many of us are very much looking forward to that. I want to get into it all with you tonight. What do you make of Suella getting the boot? I'll be bringing that up after the break. Reflecting as well on the weekend's goings-on. Did you see what happened? What do you make to what the police did in their response? And also the media as well. Was Suella right to be given the boot? I'll see you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
there you go. Lots of twists and turns throughout the day. Daniel, I think that's how you pronounce it. You've been in touch saying that you don't think Andrea Jenkins' letter of no confidence will be the last one. It'll be interesting, and don't worry, we'll be across that throughout the programme. So if anything happens, if any more letters get filed, you at home will be the very first to hear about it. I ran a Twitter poll. It's still going, actually, for about another 15 minutes. About 4,000 of you have replied so far. I asked you a simple question. Do you think Rishi Sunak was right to give Suella Braverman the boot or not? Almost 4,000 of you have replied so far. 77% of you were telling me that you're saying, no, that was not the right decision. There's a lot to unpack, Ben Habib. You know, let me just go back to the weekend. We all know the history. For time reasons, I don't need to rehash it. You were there at the weekend, so you were at both the Cenotaph in central London and also where the pro-Palestinian march was. What I'm interested, there's a few things I want to get out of this segment. Was Suella right to be given the boot? I'm interested in how the police reacted to the goings-on and how the media did.
OK, so I was at the Cenotaph to start with, and the turnout was low. But surprisingly, we were kettled quite tightly. All of us were behind barricades. It was very difficult to move, even though the turnout was low. And I know that because I had to rush to come to here to talk about my experience at the Cenotaph. And trying to get out took ages. And we could hear the noises of what people describe as the far right, the EDL, or the football supporters, as they're called. But they were just, you know...
Patriotic people?
Patriotic...
Give it a separate label?
England until we die is hardly offensive. I'm England until I die. I'm British until I die. You know, that is my position. So I don't know why that was offensive. But... then I went to the Palestinian thing after I'd been to GBNews, and I wanted to see firsthand what was going on. Physically, the march was peaceful, but verbally, it was like a non-stop assault. And this wasn't a pro-Palestinian march. This was an anti-Israeli march. Had it been a pro-Palestinian march, they would have not just called out what they describe as the indiscriminate bombing of northern Gaza. They would have called out Hamas for 17 years of misgovernance. They would have called out Hamas for holding 230-odd hostages, some of them, you know, babies, literally taken from their mothers on that awful day on the 7th of October. There was none of that. A lot of the people were dressed incredibly threateningly, and the three chants, there were two chants that were repeated incessantly. One of them was that there should be a ceasefire, by which, of course, they mean that Israel should unilaterally lay down its weapons, effectively exposing itself to an ongoing emboldened assault from Hamas. And then the second chant was Palestine shall be free from the river to the sea. And that went on and on and on. And then the third chant, which was a bit in terms of number of times it was repeated, was slightly less, but very prevalent, was that Israel is a terrorist state. And they were marching to this drumbeat all the way from the top of Park Lane to the American Embassy. And then I went home to watch the mainstream coverage, because obviously I've got a sort of masochistic streak in me, but I watched the BBC and Sky News on it, and they didn't cover for a second the verbal aggression that was coming out of that march. They focused incessantly on what they call the thuggery of the right wing part who'd been assaulted by the police. But the right wing, I think, were pushed into it. And I do agree with Suella. There was a two-tier policing going on. The police were too afraid or too unprepared to tackle the belligerence coming out of the anti-Israeli march, and they were too ready and prepared to challenge the English.
Scarlett?
What you haven't said at all is, I mean, there were 9 policemen injured, weren't there, at the Cenotaph, not by the pro-Palestinian people, by the people who you call patriots. I mean, something happened at the Cenotaph.
I'm not in any way endorsing thuggery. I just want to be clear. But we were kettled. Even civilised individuals like me were kettled.
But look at those fellas on the screen now. If you're listening, not watching, look, a long story short, there's guys there getting absolutely battered with their batons. There's scuffles. You know, I don't envy the police officers. I would not want to police anything like this, quite frankly, because I do think often they are disrespected.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that listening to you, there's a real problem about the Palestinian march, and then the problem about the Cenotaph was that they were kettled. But actually, the people who came down to the cenotaph, the police were worried about them causing trouble, and quite rightly. I mean, they did throw missiles. I mean, 9 policemen were injured, right? So, and then they went to Soho, because they wanted to go to the Palestinian march and cause trouble. They were there to cause
Scarlett,
trouble.
I'm not endorsing or forgiving their behaviour in any way whatsoever, but I'm just telling you that very civilised behaviour was treated with zero tolerance at the cenotaph. People like me couldn't get about easily, even though the turnout was low. And that was in marked contrast to what was happening down Park Lane, where people were saying stuff which, to the naked layman, the Clapham omnibus layman, was offensive and, in my view, broke the law. It was an incitement to violence. It broke the Racial and Religious Act of 2006 and a whole load of other acts which require people to, act peaceably in public. And I found it offensive. I was scared. I was scared being there, but I felt I had to be there to see what it was.
Well, this is a conversation that I'm really keen to continue. I want you to come in on this at home as well. What did you make of the goings-on at the weekend? And crucially, was Suella right to be given the boot? That conversation is going to continue in a couple of minutes. See you then.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Fed up of being patronised and bored to death by other afternoon news shows? Me too. So I thought, if you want a job done properly, do it yourself. News as it breaks on TV, radio and online. All the big debates and the best guests on the topics that you actually care about. Whether you're having discussions with your mates down the pub, in your van to and from work, or around the dinner table with your family, that's the kind of stuff that this show is all about. Join me, Patrick Christie's 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry till 7, leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib, and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire continue alongside me. Let's continue this conversation about the goings-on at the weekend. Where were we? So we're discussing actually the goings-on in terms of where was the peace, and I guess what I'm trying to get to is, was Suella Braverman right?
Well, she wanted the Palestinian march disallowed, right? And Mark Rowley said, you know, all my intelligence says that there is not going to be trouble on that march. Now, whatever Ben says, it was the same sort of march, as far as I can gather, as they've always been. That there wasn't trouble in the way that there weren't fights, there wasn't violence. I take it...
It did come later. There was violence later in the day.
Hold on a second. There wasn't fights, there wasn't violence, but there were just random people casually endorsing terrorism and terror groups. And I'm going to start playing...
And there was violence at the end of the day. There was violence at the end of the day.
We'll bring up some of the footage.
But what I mean, actually, the reason...
Why do you dismiss that, by the way? Because I think that is a really... When I say then, you're saying there's not fighting, there's not violence, and I say, oh, no, there's just casual displays of people agreeing with a terrorist organisation. And you kind of go, ugh, as though that's because
I actually think most of them... I mean, I know people who go on those marches, and I know people, you know... I mean,
I didn't say it was all of them.
Who are in central London.
There's a minority
there
there
is a minority, and I think that anybody who thinks anything positive about Hamas is completely and utterly
look
mad.
Look at this fella on the screen now. He's saying Hamas is ISIS. You want to see it, guys? He gets swarmed around. He gets, you know, a very, very hostile and aggressive reaction, I would say. He's just basically saying that Hamas are terrorists.
Right. I mean, and Hamas are terrorists. I mean, and the whole problem with what's going on in Gaza, right, is that what the Israelis are doing is they're doing exactly what Hamas wants. What Hamas wants is for the Israelis to kill lots of Palestinians, right? And then it will completely and utterly wreck any sort of peace in the region. That's what this is all about.
If you'd said that on that march, you would have been in physical danger. I can tell you that.
Can I just clarify a double standard? Because I don't mean to be rude, but I do feel like there is a little bit of a double standard going on here. Because when I mentioned to you then the pro-Palestinian marches, and I'm saying to you, there was casual endorsement, well, it wasn't that casual, actually, it was quite scary, out-and-out endorsement and support of a terrorist organisation, you immediately dismiss that and say, well, that was a minority. 2 minutes ago, when you're talking about the collective that some people are calling counter-protesters, whatever, you will say to me that they were all violent, so you don't select the minority.
They were all violent. What I said was, listening to Ben, I would not have known that 9 police officers were injured by people at the cenotaph. I mean, I think
which no one would condone, by the way, but you, I saw Tommy Robinson tweeting you earlier on, I think it was yesterday or today, he was tweeting a clip of you where you'd said that he had been chucking missiles at police officers.
No, I said Tommy Robinson's people, and I did get called scum, which is really nice. So that's great. I mean, it's just what one wants.
Well, just to be clear, Scarlett is not scum. I don't agree with that. But you're not scum.
And I certainly didn't accuse you of doing it.
No, but then the problem that people have got, Scarlett, it's really important, is that when people generalise and they will say those protesters, like, look at those far-right protesters, they're doing this, they're doing that. They were pushing police officers. I don't support that behaviour. But then they were kettled in the first place.
They were. We were kettled in.
No, hold on. And when the left gets kettled, no, you go, well, that's the problem of being on that march. I mean...
Well, I'm just saying the march wasn't kettled. The march had full...
But there have been masses of marches where people have been kettled, and people have been kettled, people like you, people who were never on the march but were in the wrong place at the wrong time. What I'm saying is, of course, anybody who supports Hamas, right, I am completely and utterly condemning, because I mean, you know, you don't have to have any brains at all to say that what Hamas did was awful, but also what Hamas wanted, which is what's going on in Gaza at the moment, is appalling. But what I'm saying is that if you had watched GB News or listened to Ben, you would not know that there were missiles thrown at the cenotaph.
Well, I can tell you what, if you'd have listened to Channel 4 News, did you see what they tweeted out? They put a tweet, and I'm going to get it up for you. They had to hastily delete it, by the way. Let me just bring this tweet up, because I think it's a very important part. It just shows you, if you ask me, how some of the mainstream media do behave. They said, after being branded hate marches by the Home Secretary, a massive pro-Palestinian protest passed off peacefully with hundreds of thousands in attendance. The only scuffles on the day involved hard far-right protesters who clashed with the police. That wasn't true, so they hastily deleted it.
And that was the same message from Sky and BBC all afternoon. I was absolutely tearing my hair out. Suella Braverman shouldn't have been sacked, and she was right. Suella said, if this march goes ahead, there will be scuffles with the police, there'll be two-tier policing, and there will be violence. And that's exactly what happened. If the anti-Israeli march hadn't taken place, you wouldn't have had any of this on Saturday. And it's a tragedy, really. And the next day, when, of course, there were no protests, we had a solemn, poignant commemoration of those people who died for us, to give us the freedoms that we now all enjoy and that, in my view, was taken advantage of by these anti-Israeli marchers on Saturday.
Those people, by the way, because it was very widely shared, that footage of those people trying to push past that kettle to get to the cenotaph. I just do want to make the point that they did get closer to the cenotaph, and once there, they did behave in a respectful manner. They did quietly observe, respectfully, that 2-minute march. I have to say, though, I did also see people covering their faces in that crowd as well with balaclavas and stuff. That is just disgusting.
That's
not
disgusting.
appropriate.
And it's really important to say that the British Legion felt that the Palestinian march should go ahead, right? They said yes. And actually,
let's ask about Suella then. Do you think she should have been given the boot?
Yeah, the thing about Suella is she's not a team player. I mean, it's really, really simple. What Suella did was that she deliberately went out and was not part of cabinet responsibility. She put an article in the Times that she refused to change. I mean, when I was on Jacob Rees-Mogg's show, he said that he disagreed with something in cabinet. It was changing the law around ID for voting and saying you had to have photo ID. He totally disagreed with it. He stuck up for it the whole time he was in cabinet, and only when he left the cabinet did he say that he thought it was a form of gerrymandering. And I think Jacob was right, actually, that if you're in cabinet, I was thinking...
But Scarlett, the only bit of the letter on which she was asked by Number 10 to make a variation was where she compared the march to what used to happen in Northern Ireland. That was the only bit.
Well, why didn't she take it out? It was really offensive to people in Ireland.
Yeah, but it didn't have any impact whatsoever on the outcome of Saturday.
But the point is that what she showed was how weak Rishi Sunak was. Right?
Well, he is weak. He is weak. That's why he sacked her.
No, I mean, he had to. He had to say...
No, but Scarlett, there was another route. He could have said, I endorse my Home Secretary. I want to...
He kept on endorsing...
I want to back her.
What she said about Ireland was disgraceful, actually.
It's ambiguous.
It was not...
I'm the biggest proponent of Northern Ireland. You can't have a bigger proponent of Northern Ireland than I am.
Well, I don't know what a proponent of Northern Ireland is.
A supporter of Northern Ireland.
Yes, but there's a lot of different voices in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, but she was the
and
ostensibly...
what she said, and I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I was with another television presenter who was Irish from the Republic. He was deeply offended, and I said, no, she's clarified. She didn't mean the orange marches. And he went, what? She just meant the Catholics. They all were furious in Northern Ireland.
Well, no one knows what she meant because it was ambiguous.
She said, she clarified actually afterwards. So what I'm saying is that if you're part of the cabinet, if you think of Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, we know, right, that Gordon Brown loathed Tony Blair. Never once did he publicly make it clear, right? And it was really, really important. If you're in the cabinet, you're part of a team.
Not once did Suella say she loathes Rishi Sunak. Not once. She was doing her job as Home Secretary. She's had both her hands tied, unable to do what she wishes to do with illegal migration, unable to do what she wishes to do with legal migration, and indeed with the two-tier policing that we've got. And while we're on two-tier policing, I want to just say that the fundamental problem in this country that we now face with multiculturalism is diversity, equality and inclusion. The training that all our police force get, our armed forces get, our health service gets, private enterprise, government agencies right across the UK are all drilled with DEI, which effectively is the promotion of minority interest against the majority. And the police feel they've got to actually be uneven because that's their regulatory obligation.
That is why an independent review of the police, commissioned by the police, said that they were the Metropolitan Police are institutionally racist and sexist, right? Because of their behaviour. Don't talk to me about the Metropolitan being woke.
I do not accept that this country is institutionally racist in any organisation other than in one respect, and that is the promotion of ethnic minorities above and beyond and to the detriment of the indigenous people. That's how racism is now being practiced in this country, and that's why that anti-Israeli march was tolerated. It should never have happened, and if multiculturalism was working, those people would never have wished to have marched in the way that they did.
You know as well as I do that most people on that march were white. Right, it wasn't about, we let the black people go. But there is a really serious thing that what happens in the Metropolitan Police, right, is the way they treat women and the way they treat black people is not good. It is not.
I don't buy it. I'm really sorry.
An independent review that Mark Rowley
An independent review done, no doubt, by a whole load of people who've been hijacked by exactly the same philosophy about which I'm complaining.
Dave Louise Casey, right, who was commissioned by Cressida Dick to do it.
Cressida Dick, exactly, had to resign.
Had to resign because of the racism and sexism in the Metropolitan Police. That's why she went. That's why she had to go, right, was because she was not keeping, she was not changing the culture, which was deeply racist and deeply sexist.
Let me tell you, and I say this as someone who's half ethnically Pakistani, the racism in this country is not against minority ethnic people like myself. It is against the indigenous white majority. Take it from me. I've seen it. I've seen it in practice.
I am indigenous and white, right?
And you are, and they will not hesitate to prejudice your position in this country because they're regulated to do so. It's absolute. It's a fact.
Absolute rubbish.
It's a fact.
Well, there you go. Scarlett says it's absolute rubbish that he's talking. What do you make to it all? Divided opinions as well about whether or not Suella Braverman was right to have been given the boot. Of course, to all of those Met Police officers that were hurt over the weekend, that is tragic. And of course, I wish all of them well. There should be no violence on our streets like that, whichever side of the argument that you are on. It's just not necessary. After the break, David Cameron, the Tories now being pulled over to the right, sorry, to the centre. Are they abandoning? I don't think they could have gone much further to the right, but anyway, are they abandoning the right? And what does that mean? You tell me. I'll see you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's been a day of sackings and shocking comebacks.
Tonight, the 2-hour Farage special on this huge moment in British politics. And heading down under, the political icon set to create a rumble in the jungle.
Right, well, I bet the hat size isn't big enough, but there you go. No, nowhere near big enough.
Don't miss Farage tonight from 7 p.m.
Divided opinions at home. Suella has been talking tough for months, but what she's actually done, Michelle, that is the question. I can't think of a single thing, says David. Yes, David, but the flip side to that will be, what has she been allowed to do? Of course, you'll be familiar with the fact that on Wednesday you've got the Supreme Court's ruling over Rwanda. So she's tried to do a lot, and I would argue she's been blocked at a lot of twists and turns. Get this view, though. Robert says, I'm very glad to see David Cameron back in the government. He will be a very capable Foreign Secretary. He is respected around the world, says my viewer Robert. Where are you on that, Ben?
Well, let's just talk about the role that he's got for a second. If there's anyone who is interested in the promotion of Palestinian rights, they should be absolutely devastated by David Cameron's appointment to Foreign Secretary. This is the Prime Minister. Let's not forget this. This is the Prime Minister who advocated for, financed, campaigned for the Arab Spring in 2011. That resulted in a complete destabilisation of North Africa all the way nearly to Saudi and beyond to Bahrain. And we would have had virtually the entire Middle East up in flames. It was because of the Arab Spring that General Mubarak, who was effectively a friend of Western democracies, was deposed, and the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an extreme Islamist entity, took over Egypt. We nearly lost Egypt from the fold of interacting with the Western world as a result of David Cameron's actions. He's done more to damage. There's only one, I'll talk about the other individual who's damaged Palestinian rights more than David Cameron, but David Cameron has done an enormous amount, perhaps one of the leading contributors to damage to the Palestinians in the West, exceeded only by one other individual, and that is Tony Blair.
Oh, we'll come on to him in a minute, because there's rumours about something that he might be getting involved in, but carry on with Cameron.
Tony Blair set this whole thing off in the Middle East with the invasion of Iraq, which he claimed, in my view, remains an illegal war. He claims to have been legitimate because we were under threat of a 45-minute attack from Saddam Hussein. But what we did is destabilise a country that, again, was acting as a bulwark against Iran. Iran now has much freer reign in the Middle East because of Tony Blair, and because it has freer reign, it has been funding Hamas, and it has been getting Hamas to do its evil work for it. We don't want David Cameron or Tony Blair anywhere near the Palestinian issue.
Get off that fence. Scarlett Maguire, where are you?
I basically agree with Ben. I would like to, when we're talking about David Cameron, let's talk about Libya. Right?
Well, yeah, Libya, absolutely.
I mean, a complete and utter disaster. It went from being a difficult place that we could have gone into to being a complete hellhole, which it is at the moment, right? That's David Cameron's foreign policy. God forbid. And of course I completely opposed Iraq all the way through. And we found out that they played with words, and the 45-minute thing was Cyprus. It was never going to be Britain. There were no weapons of mass destruction. All of it was frankly, it was all got up as part of so-called 9/11. Not that Iraq had anything to do with what happened. Absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. And it was a load of Iraqi exiles who knew nothing about what was going on in Iraq, who persuaded America to do it. And then we did. What we've got to stop doing is we always do what America says. Shoulder to shoulder, said Blair. And we went in to a terrible war that has... The repercussions...
600,000 people died.
In the middle, 600, but the repercussions in the middle... That
still was going on.
So they get rid of Al-Qaeda and we have ISIS. That's the problem, is they do not understand anything. And then Afghanistan.
And Hamas...
Look, we've got the Taliban.
Hamas is stronger because of the foreign policy decisions taken by Blair and his heir, Cameron. The heir to Blair was Cameron. He prosecuted a ridiculous foreign policy. He should have learnt from the mistakes made by Blair. Instead, he doubled down. He made all those mistakes again. Libya is a disaster as a result. And Syria is a disaster as a result of that foreign policy. Egypt nearly became a basket case, and Hamas is strengthened by the fact that David Cameron was Prime Minister. And for Sunak to say he possesses special qualities and deserves to be Foreign Secretary absolutely is the most ridiculous thing on earth. Cameron should be nowhere near government. He resigned because he falsely campaigned for Remain. He lost that vote. He poisoned the well with the EU. He should be nowhere near front bench politics. He's not in front bench because he's going to hide out in the House of Lords.
And very briefly then, this whole notion that Tony Blair could potentially be a humanitarian envoy to help with the situation in Gaza.
God forbid.
God forbid. If there's any humanitarian interest in resolving the Palestinian issue peacefully, you don't put Tony Blair anywhere near it.
I mean, you know, he's doing nothing at the moment. I mean, it's interesting. The Israelis want him, right? Because they think that he'll go to the Palestinians and say, "This is what you have to do."
But it won't be peaceful.
It's hopeless.
It's
absolutely hopeless.
And what do you think? Almost out of time. Look, it flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? But look, this is very much Sunak repositioning the Tories to the centre.
To the left. They were already left of centre. Now they've gone even further left.
So, Ben, I wish we have a right-wing Tory party, not right enough for you two. This is no left-wingers.
How are they right-wing?
Well, everything, this anti-wokery, which is completely rubbish. What do they ever do?
It's not rubbish. I've got, just as it's not rubbish, I've got endometriosis. I was diagnosed when I was about 16. It's a very painful condition. It only affects women.
It's a terrible
It only affects women. I couldn't help but notice the other day, who's now in charge of one of the endometriosis societies?
A trans woman. I read it too, and I thought, isn't it amazing? I don't have to discuss this on Michelle's programme today.
Carry on anyway. So how else are the Tories right-wing?
I think... But I mean, they are. What the first thing?
You've not given me any examples.
Well, OK, Rwanda. I know it hasn't happened yet. I call Rwanda pretty right wing. I mean, I call
that tooth and nail. That has been fought tooth and nail, and we still don't know whether or not it's even going to get off the ground.
Well,
and even if it does, it won't work. It's
difficult. Of course, it won't work.
Highest
of course,
taxes.
It won't work. Of course, it. I mean, the problem is everything they do doesn't work, right? And it's all sort of gesture politics.
Absolutely, 24-hour news cycle in gestures.
Yeah,
but they are wealth redistribution. Rather than wealth creation. They are dependency rather than aspiration. They've borrowed more than any government in history. They've spent more than any other government in history, and they've taken taxes to a historic high. That, to me, is socialism. And they haven't broken from the EU economic model or regulatory framework, which is fundamentally also socialist. This is a socialist government. Suella
Rishi Sunak is no socialist.
Rishi Sunak is not a conservative. He's not a conservative. He's not a Brexiteer. He's not a unionist, and he's proved it today. The only sensible centre-right voice in cabinet was Suella Braverman. He's got rid of her, and he is toast.
There is nothing centre. The point about Suella Braverman, what was so stupid, is that if she wanted to achieve things, she didn't have to say the things she said. So that lots of Tory MPs who would over and over again, you had people going, well, I wouldn't say it like that. I mean, she could have done it differently, and she chose not to.
Nigel, one of my viewers, says Suella Braverman said what a lot of people thought, and now she has paid the price, the ultimate price for speaking the truth. Jay in Hull says, can you stop Ben talking about an anti-Israeli march? It's not that at all. It's just people that want peace and want the bombing of innocent people to stop. Ian says, absolutely the wrong move, sacking Suella. Cameron, who's this? Jimmy says, has anyone actually forgotten what this idiot, he refers to Cameron, his words, not mine, have done to this country? And by the way, we all forgot that he legged it as well after the mess he made with the EU vote. You make a good point there, you know, because he never, ever, I don't think, planned ahead as to what would happen if we left the EU. That is a dereliction of duties, if you ask me. Anyway, he's back. Scarlett, Ben, thank you for your time. Nigel Farage, the big one, up next. Don't go anywhere. Night.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Tomorrow will be a case of lots of showers and gusty winds with some sunny spells, particularly in the afternoon across the south. Today we've been dealing with Storm Debbie heading out now into the North Sea, but it's produced quite a lot of gusty winds through the day, and it's still producing some wet weather in eastern Scotland. That'll slowly ease through the night. There'll be showers further south, some clearer spells in between the heavy showers, and still a breezy night
night for most, although the winds, as I say, will be easing down as the storm clears through. Temperatures, as the winds ease in northern Scotland, maybe not far off freezing actually, but most places mid to high single figures, 10 or 11 in the south. Now in the southwest, some very heavy rain comes in around dawn, and this band of heavy rain with thunderstorms works its way across southern counties during the morning. Met Office do have a yellow warning in place. A lot of heavy rain falling in a short space of time, and some gusty winds, as well as flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder. As that clears, it does turn brighter in the south. Further north, lots of cloud and plenty more showers to come throughout the day. So rain just coming and going and staying pretty breezy. Again on Wednesday, certainly across most of Scotland, northern England, expect more showers. There'll be a feed of showers coming into the north coast of Northern Ireland. But northern Scotland may turn brighter and drier. Not too many showers in the south on Wednesday. A decent chance of a largely dry day here, with temperatures 8 to 10 across the north, 11 to 13 further south. Goodbye.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see